Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Or like this is internships 101 thing. Sorry.
Oh, okay. And then do you want me to go ahead and click on TLDR?
We could just start with like the homepage first. There's just like a couple of things I just want to talk about, and kind of like the little, I guess those three little like animatics or something right there. I'm just gonna talk about them really first, and then we'll go to TLDR. Uh, so I should probably introduce myself. So I know that the CSS team did a really great job of sending like an introduction. So my name is Aaron Levitt. I work as a software systems engineer at JPL. I've done a lot of interviews on the interviewing side, and I've also interviewed candidates as well for internships. So I have experience with both sides of how internships actually work. So this presentation is really for students like yourself on how to get hired, what should you do, and honestly, just don't worry about it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about just like those bullet points right there. When you're trying to get hired, really what you want to do is you want to craft the best possible story for the hiring team. Uh, it's always a good idea to make sure that you have the correct technical skills that's going to fit in with what the team wants. So if they need a backend engineer, you probably will need to know Java. You probably will need to know like some sort of like routes and stuff like that. And then also too, it's really important to make sure that you vibe well with the company culture and just the team in general. You don't want to have a bad internship experience. So what should you do to get an internship? Uh, Really what hiring teams are looking for is they want you to be able to contribute, just basically value, and you need to be able to work well with others. And every hiring team is different. There's really no like cookie cutter answer. Just be like, you have to do this, this, and this. But in general, if you've worked in a group project before, if you have a readable resume, if you know the basics of programming, like if I asked you what an object is and you know what that is, you have a pretty good chance of getting an offer extended. And this is going to depend on the company. But I know for my hiring team, if you can answer that, I probably will extend something. And then just don't worry about it. Like, try not to sweat it. The company that you're applying to and the hiring team, they're just people, just like you and me. So when you're applying, be sure to cast a wide net. Like, don't get your hopes up if you don't get what you want initially. There's always alternatives to internships. You can always do research or personal projects. Uh, yeah, you can go to the TLDR if you want to. Okay, thank you. So this is the basically 5-minute TLDR. Like if you don't take anything else from this presentation, I would take away these three things. So for resumes, I highly, highly recommend using LaTeX for your resume. Like you could use Google Drive or Google Docs or like Word. That's fine too. But the reason why you want to use LaTeX is a lot of basically companies, they use something called ATS or application tracking system, and that's how we're able to actually keep track of like resumes and like people actually applying for internship requisitions or recs. If you use LaTeX, what you could do is that those systems can automatically fill out fields such as skills or education, so you don't have to go through like just applying like, or when you're doing like an application, you fill out the skills and you have to like search for Git, or if you have to search for like Java and you have to do it like all the time. If you use LaTeX, it just automatically fills it in for you. So it definitely helps with basically your resume and also for the application part. And then if you scroll down a little bit, for the actual applications itself, uh, really the most important thing, like from my side when I'm like vetting candidates, is I'm going to be looking at your skills. And really, it depends on your hiring team. Like my boss, he cares a lot about GPA, and I personally don't because that doesn't like really vet a candidate. But everybody's going to be different. But really, when I'm doing the first search for interns, I'm like, okay, I have a full stack web application. I need to make sure this person knows JavaScript. I need to make sure this person knows React, stuff like that. So I'm going to see that from your skill section, because on my end, what I get is basically like Google, and I can just search up like I need a candidate that knows this, and I won't get that unless you guys fill out the skill section. So it's really important to do that. And then if it goes well and you seem like a good fit for my team, I'm going to go on to the interview stage. So for interviews, you want to stand out. If you can scroll down a little bit, thank you. You want to stand out in a positive and memorable way. Uh, so really, like the most important thing that you can do as an intern is you really want to be asking questions. Like when you get prompted to, like at the end of an intern or at the end of an interview, sorry, they're going to say, do you have any questions for us? I've had interviews before where they don't ask a question, and like everybody in my hiring team was like, no, we're not gonna pick this person, just because it really like sends like basically a message that you're not really interested, even though you might be interested. Uh, to us on the hiring team, what it makes it seem like is like, this person doesn't care, and we don't really want to work with somebody like that. So just ask questions, and in the more like detailed part of this presentation, I'll actually say really good questions that you can ask the hiring team. So this is the TLDR. I don't mind pausing right now for questions, or we can do it at the end. I don't know what you guys want to do, but yeah, if you guys have any questions, just hit me up. If not, we could go to the resources page so we can talk a little bit more in depth about all those different like steps in the internship process. Okay, so we can start first with resumes, because that's where you're going to start off for an internship. So it's like, okay, you need to get your foot in the door. So this is like, I'll tell you it from my side when I'm actually hiring interns. So it's like, we will literally go through hundreds or thousands of resumes before getting to yours. So you need to have your resume stand out. So like, how do you do that? So really like what to put like on a resume, because like the most important thing is that it needs to be readable, because like we're not going to spend hours going through resumes. I have other work that I have to do, so I can't do that. So in general, when I'm looking at a resume, what I want to see is like, do you have any professional experience? Do you have any personal projects? Do you have like technical skills? And then GPA and education for me is not as high a priority, but it's going to depend on your industry that you're going into. It's going to depend on your company. It's going to depend on the hiring manager. But just for me, those are the things that I care about. And obviously, the thing at the top with the professional experience, it's like a catch-22 where it's like, well, I'm trying to get an internship so I can put it on my resume that I have professional experience. But really, when I'm interviewing interns, I know that you guys don't have as much skills, and actually for certain things, you're going to actually know more than me. But I need to make sure that you can work well with others. So it's like, if you have a personal project, uh, try to get your friends or like other people involved in the project, because I need to make sure that you can work well with others. That's an important thing. So yeah, those are the most valuable things in like a resume. And then there's a template that you can use. This is what I actually do with my resume. I just use a template. I just change the template around so it fits basically my experience, and then I go from there. And then, okay, cool. You made the resume. Now, what do you do from there? You probably should look it over. So if you scroll down a little bit, thank you. Yeah, you should 100% look it over. So there's actually resources on campus that you can use. So there's the Career Center. They can help look over your resume. And then just like ask your friends or mentors to look it over too. I mean, like just in general, when you have work, you want to get somebody to like look it over, because you might think your resume is awesome, and then like it gets on my doorstep or it gets on a hiring team's doorstep, and they might be like, I don't know about this one sheet. So just have somebody look it over, and people are always like, in my experience at least, they're always looking like forward to like helping people out. So that's always a good thing. Okay, so you got the resume down. You put everything there. Okay, now we're gonna go on to the next step. So now we're doing applications. Okay, so applications are going to be your first connection between you and the company you want to intern at. So it's really important that you craft a good application to the hiring team, because I have to read it in order to like interview you, and then if you are a good fit, extend an offer. So how do you apply efficiently? So obviously you can just do it the manual way, which is what I've always done for every single job I've ever had, which is just you apply on the company website, and then you keep track of your applications on a spreadsheet or not. I mean, it's perfectly up to you. But there's actually ways that you can do it automatically with AI. So there's a couple of services right there that you can click, and I'm going to share these slides later so you can check them out. But basically, these simplify, or they automate the process of actually sending out applications to companies. So if you have like, I'm going to send out 100 applications and stuff like that, you can use these two services, and just know that like a lot of services, they may require a fee, or you will only have like a limited amount of applications in a day. So, your mileage may vary. Just be aware of that. Okay, cool. So you applied to maybe like 100 different positions, and really you probably should have done this before you started applying, but you could do it afterwards too. It's not a big deal. So like basically looking over the position. So it just like the resumes, it's always a good idea to kind of like get your ducks in a row before you actually go into doing something. you kind of want to make sure you do actually have the technical skills to do the job. And really, for me, uh, as an intern, it's not going to be that big of a deal because by design, internships are supposed to be like short. Basically, it's you can think of an internship as an interview process where the company is trying to see if you're a good fit to work there long term as a full-time employee. Or, I mean, in the same way for you, you're going to want to see if you want to work for this company. So you want to make sure that the company culture is a good fit for you. And this is just anecdotal experience. Like the job that I have right now, when I was applying, they wanted me to know like Java and JavaScript. And at that time, I didn't know either of them. In fact, I've never even coded in either of those two languages. And my boss just liked me so much that he extended an offer. So really don't worry if you don't fulfill all the qualifications for a job. If you feel like you can do it, I would still apply. You really never know unless you try. So that's looking over the position. So, okay, cool. You applied to a bunch of different applications and a company got back to you and they called. Uh, and this is not in the slides, but I will also say like turnaround time. Uh, just know that like on our side for the hiring team, when we're actually looking at applications, you might apply in like say like November or October or like sometime early in this semester, and then you won't hear back until like spring. The reason why is always budget, is because we need to finalize our budget before we actually say like, okay, we want to hire 1 or 2 interns for this position, and then go from there. And then also, two people on the hiring team are people, so they're going to get lazy. They're going to forget they have vacation. So don't worry if they don't get back to you immediately. Like we are looking, I can assure you that. It's just we need to make sure that your skills fit the rec or the requisition. And it's like, if you've been doing stuff in school, like group projects and stuff, you're probably going to like do well. And especially if you're in a club like CSS, that's something I'm looking at too, is because I know that you can work well with others. Okay. So applications, cool. Say like you do an application and then you get called in to do an interview. So let's go to the interview section and then I can talk a little bit about interviews. So I'll talk a little bit about on what you guys should be expecting on your end, and then what I'm expecting on my end when I do actually interview interns for internship positions. Okay, so it's pretty normal for an interview that you could feel nervous or anxious. That's perfectly fine. Just know that if you get to the interview step, your resume had basically it stood out between hundreds or thousands of different resumes to interview. So you're doing something right. So you should feel good about that. Okay, so what should you do before? So when you're going into this interview, you want to be in the best mental state that you can possibly be. So try to get an appropriate amount of sleep. This I don't always like say like, oh, you have to get 9 hours. It's going to depend on your chronotype or basically your sleep schedule, because some people are night owls, some people are more like early birds. It really just depends. But whatever the appropriate amount of sleep is for you, get it. Uh, don't be hangry or hungry going into the interview. Duh. Uh, I always like to lay out what I'm going to wear before an interview. It's recommended to wear business casual, but honestly, your mileage may vary. I've seen people on the hiring team just wear a t-shirt, so like it doesn't matter. But in general, you probably should be wearing something better than or more fancier than what the hiring team is. It just communicates that you care about the interview. Have a list of questions that you're going to ask. That's super important. And I have like a section there so you can see questions. Practice leak code and review your technical knowledge before. On my hiring team, we do not ask leak code, but I know that there's definitely like companies that will ask you that. And I'll talk about like the section and what to do during if you are actually going to be doing that in your interview. And then online only, which is a lot of interviews that we actually do nowadays. Just make sure everything works. I actually remember I was in an interview like a couple weeks ago and I didn't even have Teams installed. And so I'm like freaking out during the interview that I don't even have the thing installed. So don't be me. Just make sure, everything works. Your computer works, camera works, your mic works. You have everything installed that you need, because every single like company is different. Every single hiring team is different. So you might be using Teams, you might be using Zoom, Google Meets. Just either have the desktop app installed or just make sure it works on your browser. And if push comes to shove, just call on your mobile device. The worst thing you could do is just not show up to the interview. Okay, so that's what to do before. So here's like a list of questions that you can ask. So it's super important to actually have these questions. Like, I mean, you could have them like a list before, and you can even have them like you can look at the list during the interview. But you really want to be answering like or asking a question. I'll say an anecdote after I go through these lists of questions. But here's a list of questions that you can like ask. This just basically shows like not only interest, but it can give you like an indication on if, like the company culture is toxic, or if the company culture is the right fit for you. Um, if you're able to actually be extended a full-time offer, what's going to be like to actually, do the job. So you can ask like, why did this position open up? What's the culture like? Work-life balance, a day in the life. How do you grow in the position? How many people will you be working with? What do you like most about working at the company? What does the timeline look like to hear back about a decision? That's always a really good question to ask, because sometimes like interns don't ask that, and then they kind of get like nervous, like, oh, I didn't hear back. But if you prompt the hiring team to say, what does your timeline look like? Uh, you can kind of get a sense of like, will they stick to their commitments, or they're just going to be like whatever. And that can give you an indication, is this going to be a right fit for me, type of thing, for the basically company that you want to intern with. So anecdote. So we were interviewing a candidate like a couple of years ago, and they actually had a pretty good like background. Like they interned at Google. I think they were from like Stanford or something like that. It's just like a really prestigious school. And we do like the interview, and he's answering all the questions right. And I had a couple technical questions. Like for me, when I ask questions during an interview, I don't like making the candidate look dumb or stupid, because really what I wanted you to do is learn. But I do need you to understand certain things. Like if I'm doing a web dev position, I kind of need you to understand how to center a div, and I kind of need you to understand how to like handle promises in JavaScript. And so the candidate actually did really well, and they were able to answer all the questions. And then when we were basically at the end of the interview, we asked like, do you have any questions for us? And he was like, no, I got it. And we were like, yeah, no, we have our company Slack, or if you guys have never used Slack before, it's basically like Discord. So we have our company Slack, and me, my boss, and my senior engineer are in that Slack, and we're like, no, we're not picking this guy because he didn't answer any questions. And it was so bad that when we extended an offer to a different candidate, uh, they ended up not being able to accept it. It was a technicality. And so we were going through our list of candidates, and I had suggested to my boss, why don't we get the Google guy? And he's like, no, we're not getting him. I'm like, damn, I didn't know you messed up that bad, bro. So what I'm trying to say is try to ask questions. It's super important to do that. Okay, cool. So you got your ducks in a row. You know what to do before the interview. What do you do during the interview? So really the most important thing, and if you can scroll down a little bit, please. The most important thing, thank you, that you can do during an interview is you want to get a good vibe with the hiring team. Uh, so when I'm doing an interview, I want to gauge if you can work well with others and you can do the job. So how do you have a good vibe with the hiring team? Just in general, it's a good idea to listen as much as possible during the interview. Let them do the majority of the talking, because really it depends on what you're doing, but interviews are usually structured like this. They have a behavioral side, so they're going to ask you questions like, tell me about a time where you encountered a challenge, or tell me about this time that you coded this. And also too, we on the hiring team will have your resume in front of us, so we're looking at it on our screen. Anything on your resume is fair game, so it's a good idea to actually know what you're talking about, and do not lie too. We can actually tell almost immediately what your role is. So like if you're working in a group project and you did programming, or I'll say like more in depth, say like you're doing like the front end and you're doing the components for a web app. If like how you talk about it is going to give us an indication of how much you actually worked on the project, or if you're just kind of like, whatever, I was just kind of there. Uh, so don't lie. I mean, that's just kind of an obvious thing. And like I said, listen. So if your interview has a technical coding assessment, uh, this is really important. So, if you have like leak code, easy or medium, depending on what you're doing, uh, ask the interviewer clarifying questions. So I can give an example. When I was doing, it wasn't leak code, but basically a technical coding assessment. So I had to go code like a weather application, right? And so they're telling me like you need to display like the weather from this API in like Celsius and Fahrenheit and basically all this like different stuff. And so I kept asking clarifying questions like, do you guys care about styling? Where do you want me to get this API from? Can I hard code certain values? You want to be asking these clarifying questions because you don't want to deliver an incorrect piece of code that's just not good, and two, you don't want to be spending too much time on something that doesn't matter to the interviewer. So yeah, make sure that you ask those clarifying questions. And then at the end, like I mentioned, ask questions. I'm not going to go back into the previous anecdote, but you kind of know why. It's important to do that. And then it's always just a good idea, just in general, but especially during an interview, just show gratitude and appreciation to the hiring team. I definitely do remember that if like an intern is just being cool, please and thank you go a long way. Duh. So yeah, just do that. So that's what to do during an interview. So what do you do afterwards? Okay, so congrats on finishing your interview. If you have the contact information of the recruiter, and that's usually what happens for an internship, is a recruiter will be reaching out to you first. When us on the hiring team make a decision on we want to interview this person, it's usually a recruiter that reaches out to you. Sometimes it will be the hiring team. It's company dependent. But if you have the contact information of either the recruiter or the hiring team, just send them a thank you email. And you don't need to get really fancy in the email. Just literally thank you for your time is like, for me at least, that's good enough. That just shows me like, hey man, you're grateful for the time that you spent interviewing, because I had to take time out of my day to interview guys. And I always enjoy doing interviews, but you know, I got other stuff that I gotta do. So just showing gratitude is always gonna go a long way. Uh, you should reward yourself. I mean, it's totally optional, but you know, if you do something important, you should reward yourself. And it's like I mentioned, if you get to an interview stage, regardless if they extend an offer or not, know that your resume had to go through, like, your resume was picked out of hundreds, or in some cases, like mine, thousands of different resumes before it got to an interview. So you should, you know, reward yourself. Get boba, get dinner, just do something nice for yourself. And then also too, don't keep sending the company emails after you send them a thank you note. You want to be cautious as coming off too desperate or annoying. Me personally, I don't want to work with somebody like that. And like I mentioned, hiring teams are made of people, so like they're gonna evaluate candidates. When I'm making a decision for a hiring, like if you get to the interview, I'm definitely thinking about, do you fit with the company? But I have other things in my life that I have to do too. Like I'm going to go on vacation from time to time. I have other responsibilities that I have to take care of at work. And sometimes I just get lazy. So it's, if you don't hear back immediately, don't worry about it. If you already asked the question during the interview on when you're going to hear back, and if they don't get back to you, then you can send a thing. But really, just don't sweat it. It's not the end of the world. And set realistic expectations for yourself. Um, know that when I'm like interviewing, or basically the hiring team is interviewing, it's not just we're interviewing you. Most likely, we will be interviewing 5 to 10 different candidates for a position. Sometimes more. It just depends on the hiring team. You may hear a no, or you might get ghosted. I personally do not like ghosting my candidates. I will send them something, but you know, you might get that. So, you know, just don't beat yourself up. Just like I said, keep thinking back to the part that if you get to this stage, your resume was like good and you did something right. And then if you hear a no or you get ghosted, just go to the applications page and just repeat all the steps there until you get extended an offer. Okay, so that's what to do after. Let's go to offers. So that's exciting. Okay, so cool. You just got a internship offer. Congratulations. So it's a very exciting time because it's an offer. So obviously you can accept or decline. I mean, I've never declined an offer because I usually will just understand from the interview stage if it's not the right like fit for me. But you are allowed to do that if you want to. But generally, you're going to be accepting. So what to do once you accept and how to get the most out of your internship. So obviously, just make sure everything in the offer is correct. You would actually be surprised. Like, it's not common, but I've seen it happen before where people will mess up like your name or your address on file or your salary. And you want to make sure that's like correct in writing because you can always dispute it. If you don't have it in writing, you can't really dispute it. So just make sure everything is correct. For an internship, you don't really want to negotiate salary, but you can if you want. The company's not going to rescind your offer or basically just say no if you do negotiate. And if they do, that's, in my opinion, a pretty toxic company. But in general, you don't need to negotiate. Internships are designed in a way as basically an extended interview process just to make sure, like, maybe you can work for us full time. And so, obviously, I know you guys need your salary to pay things, especially like rent and stuff like that, but don't really worry about negotiating your salary for right now. You will want to do negotiations when you're extending a full time offer. Uh, Not in the scope of this presentation, but if you guys are interested, just hit me up. Okay, so talk with your recruiter about basically social media sites, so like Discord, Slack, Reddit, anything like that. Is going to be really important because you can make professional and personal connections there. And usually for internships, you're going to have people coming from all different parts of the country and depending on the company from the world. So you can actually make a lot of great connections from that. One thing that you can use these sites for is housing. So like it depends on where you're applying to. I remember my first internship, I had to move out of state. And so I was really lucky that I had a twin brother that I could just live with. But there's not everybody's going to have a twin brother that they can just live with. And sometimes you're going to need to get a roommate. And so it's a good idea to actually talk with those people on those sites just to see if you can get like a roommate or secure housing because you will need that for your internship. Um, Make sure you ask questions during your internship and even before too. But especially during your internship, at least for me, when I'm hiring interns, I want to make sure that my interns are in a safe environment because I want them to grow and learn from their experience. And good like companies and non-toxic teams are the exact same. They want you to grow in that environment, so make the most out of it. Ask them questions and learn from others. And then this is going to be for like if you want to either stay with the company or if you want to get a full-time offer with them. This is always just going to be dictated by budget. Like you could be the coolest person ever, and if I just don't have the money, I just can't hire you. But you can always ask your hiring manager. When I was in your guys' position, when I got my first internship, I actually asked my hiring manager to see like if there is room in the budget, if they can convert me, and they did have room in the budget, and it was cool. They extended me a conversion offer, and I went from an intern to a full-time employee. Um, and that's going to really depend on if you vibe well with the hiring team. Um, so yeah, just make sure you're doing that, just like in general. Um, but if you do vibe well with the hiring team, your manager, even if they don't have budget in their immediate team, they will go out of your way to find budget for you in a different team. And that's really going to come from if you vibe well. If you don't, they're probably going to just say, hey, thank you so much for this internship experience and have a good one. All right, so that's when you get extended an offer and you accept. What if you change your mind? This is extremely uncommon, but it's not like out of the realm. So say like you accept an offer, you decide to go on Glassdoor and you're reading all the comments and you're like, this place might be toxic. I don't want to go there. So extremely unlikely to happen. But what if you accept your offer and you don't want to work for the company anymore? Or more common scenarios, you are applying to a bunch of different places. You have your dream job, or you have like this is your number one pick, and then you have like a different company that's like your backup option. And your backup option, they send you like an offer, you accept, and then your dream company, they extend you an offer. You want to go to them, but you already told the other company like, hey, I want to go with you guys. It's not the end of the world if you renege your offer or basically just go back on what you said. But if you do decide to do it immediately. Uh, you're usually going to be doing it over email because generally you haven't started yet. Um, and just know, like, first of all, you're not like it's not the end of the world. You might be put on a blacklist, but usually that blacklist is for the industry only. So, say like you are applying for like positions like I can pick on the aerospace defense industry because I work in that. So, say like you're applying for like defense recruiters, and you get an offer from like Meta or like a FANG company or something like that, you'd rather go to the FANG company, but you already accepted the offer with defense contractor. You tell them no, you'll be probably put on their blacklist for that particular industry, but you'll be fine because you're not going to stay in that industry. You're going to a different industry. Yeah, basically what I'm trying to say, it's not the end of the world if you do decide to do it, but if you do it, just do it immediately. Yeah, that's pretty much all the things that I wanted to talk about. For basically all these slides and everything, it's a fully functioning website, so you can search anything that I was talking about. The search feature actually works. And I also version basically all my presentations too. So I might be wrong on some of the things I talked about, or there might be more information from you guys. You can always add to it. There's a section there that says edit this page. It's just like any code or anything like that. You just make a pull request. You can go from there. But yeah, this is my presentation on Internships 101. So if you guys have any questions for me, I'm willing to answer them.
I got one question.
Shoot.
How often do companies like check your GitHub or like your LinkedIn when you apply?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's going to depend on the hiring team, honestly. Like, I'll check that out just to make sure like you are telling the truth on your resume. But it's going to really depend more, I guess, on like, yeah, I would say it depends on the hiring team. But from my personal experience, yeah, I'll check it from time to time, but I'm not like dreading over it or anything like that. Your resume is the first thing I'm going to look at.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Oh, and we had a question in the classroom. I like reading questions for people who have like questions in the classroom because we don't have a mic because that's my phone right now.
Sorry, did somebody say something?
So when the interviewer asks you, tell me about yourself, how do you answer that? If you don't
Yeah.
mind me
So really, like, that's a really great question because what we're trying to do is we want to see how you respond to an open-ended question. I generally try to keep it professional. So I'm like saying like, I a good thing that you could do is just basically rehearse your resume. If you can say what's on your resume, that's a great thing to respond with because, first of all, I won't have to ask a bunch of questions about your resume. And then, second off, too, like you could say personal details. Like you could say, like, I like playing these sports, or I have like I like to say, like, a fun fact is I have a twin brother that also is a software engineer. But generally, when you get asked that question, it's the best thing that you can do is be like just say professional responses, and the best thing that you can do is just basically if you know what's on your resume and you can say that in a way that like vibes well with others, that's the best answer you can give.
when you say summarize your resume, like in how much time and how many words?
Sure. So I'll give an example. Like for me, like if you asked me that question, like tell me a little bit about yourself. So I would say, hi, my name is Aaron Levitt. It's great to be here. So I've worked as a software systems engineer for 2 years at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I've worked on full stack web applications. A couple of the web apps that I've used, they use React and TypeScript. I spent just 1 year at Lockheed Martin. I was working on an embedded software engineering application, and I used Python for that. I graduated from Cal Poly Pomona with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and then I'm currently doing my master's right now with Georgia Tech with computer science. And then I have like a couple of personal projects where I've worked as a project manager, but I've also have experience just working as like a developer. So basically stuff like that. So everything that I just said, that's actually on my resume right now. And it's not like line for line, like I literally just read it. I just know that I can talk about it. I can talk about like my experience, my education, my relevant skills, just stuff like that when you get asked like a question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, he said this.
Okay.
Well, I got a question too.
Sure.
All right, this like when applying for like internships or like new grad positions. I think like briefly mentioned it, but there's always like a desired salary section when applying. Um, usually like what should I put in there?
Sure.
Just leave it
Yeah.
blank.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, really, like, I think I can answer for everybody. At least for me, I know that the correct answer is more. But I mean, obviously, you're going to need to put a number. So, uh, really, what you could do, and I'll put this in the chat. What you can do is, if you go on that website, so it's called levels.fyi. I don't know who's driving right now. I don't know if it's you, Christopher. If you want to go on that website, it can just actually show you guys when you're actually going through salaries, like how it actually looks like. So there's this website called levels.fyi. And so what it basically is it's an aggregation of all different offers that people have gotten for like positions. So like, yeah, if you check that out. So this is like any company that you can think of. And so what's really cool about it is that when you're doing like salary negotiations and stuff like that for internships or new grad positions, and this is going to be way more relevant for new grad positions, but I know this is going to be important for you guys because you're going to go to that. If you click on any of the, like the little buttons right there, like Google, Northrop, or Disney for like the new grad, which is going to be the top one, what you'll see is how it's broken down for a compensation is you have like your salary and then you have like stock options and then like a bonus. And so that's like total compensation. When you're actually putting that down, it's a good idea to actually be vetting it based on this information because these are actually numbers that you can like see. And so if you click that little blue button that says view data points, you can get a range of like what a fair offer would look like. So like if you scroll down just a little bit more, thank you, to that little like bar thing, like that thing right there. So that little gray area, that's going to be the range that you want to give, is somewhere between that. And then, you know, if you could get on the highest end of that range, that's cool. And then if you get on the lowest end, you're still within that range. But this is like basically market analysis to show you this is what I actually want to do, or basically this is what the offer is. It's somewhere between, for if you're going to, I guess this is Disney, it would be somewhere between 125,000 and 170,000 is a fair offer. So put that range, and generally when you're doing negotiations, you want to have them say the number first, because if you give like a number, they're going to just lowball you from there. If they give you a number first, which if you give them a range, they have to give you a number, then you can negotiate from there. If you guys are interested about doing negotiations, just hit me up on Discord. I think my socials are actually in the Internships 101, so you can hit me up on like LinkedIn, Discord, whatever. I can actually go more in depth on like how you actually do the negotiations and everything from there. But to answer your question, you go on levels.fyi, you go look at the company that you're interviewing with or you're applying to, and you look at this range right here, and then you give them basically the in between that range for the salary negotiation or the salary expectations.
For sure, thank you.
Sure thing.
Blueberry scone and venti coffee.
Oh, I think we have one more question in the chat.
Sure. So, do you have to keep smiling in an interview, or does it vary role to role or organization to organization? Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, how, I guess, do you interact with your friends? Are you like smiling all the time with them? Like, I know obviously you're, even me on the hiring team, I have to put on like an act basically, but I try to be as genuinely as, or be as genuine as possible. Like, I'll say a couple of things. So, like, obviously, like on the hiring team, we can't ask you certain questions, like anything to do that's like illegal. Like, when I mean like illegal, we can't ask you about like race. We can't ask you like if you're pregnant. We can't ask you like certain things that would like violate laws. So those are questions we're never going to ask you. But like in terms of like just interviewing you and stuff like that, like yeah, I'm gonna be smiling because like I'm trying to interact with you. But you don't really need to be smiling the whole time. Like we're people at the end of the day, so we can kind of tell if you're like being fake. Just try like your best, like to be yourself is probably the best thing that I could say. Like like when you're doing a presentation, you want to keep eye contact and stuff like that. But, I can tell when you're doing a fake smile, and my hiring team does too. Try to make it genuine. When you get asked that question, like, tell me a little bit about yourself, it's never a bad idea. Like, this is just me. I try to keep it professional, but you can talk about like your personal life if you want to. Uh, if there's something that makes you happy, like genuinely, smile. Like, I'm going to notice that because another thing when we're doing the interview is I want to make sure I can work with you. Like, that's a big one. Like, I don't want to work with someone that comes off as like weird or anything like that. And like I said, don't beat yourself up or anything like that. It's perfectly fine. And even for me, when I started doing like interviews on like the other side, or not like hiring side, but basically in your guys' shoes, I messed up a lot on like a lot of different interviews. So experience will be your best teacher, and you'll get like the best feeling of like how you should actually be doing like an interview and stuff like that. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I would smile, but just try to make it genuine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What projects did you do to get your job at NASA? Like what projects do you think most helped you getting the job?
Sure. So I have a unique experience for me, just because I did NASA projects to get my job at NASA. Uh, but I know that there's like, if you guys want to work for Google, I know that Google has their Google Developer Club, and I think some of you guys are probably a part of that. Or if you want to work for like Northrop Grumman, I know they have like a Northrop Grumman project at school. So really, like the best like way to work for a company is like if you've already done a project with them. So I did. I'll put it in the chat if you guys are interested. I liked this program a lot. But I worked on these NASA projects, and what that allowed me to do was it got my foot in the door with a NASA internship, and then that NASA internship turned into my job at Lockheed Martin, and then that job turned into my current role at NASA. But what was really important about those roles was that I was able to work in a team, and I was able to kind of get like industry experience and kind of understand every single company has their own proprietary like lingo and knowledge and stuff like that. It's just like in a club, or just like in a major, you're going to have things that are specific to your club or major. And so in the same thing, like in a company, there's going to be specific proprietary information or like things that only you would know if you're working for the company. So if you have projects that they are working on, like the Google Collab or like the Northrop Grumman project, and you want to work for those companies, it's a good idea to join them and then try to make the most out of it and try to connect with people that actually work in the company. And then, like I said, I'll post the actual thing that I worked on when I was in school. I did see that thing in the chat, Mark. So also, if you're going to school but haven't enrolled yet, should you put that on your resume? Well, it depends. I mean, like, if you haven't enrolled but you're in the school, yes. But if you haven't got like an acceptance letter from the school, then probably no. Yeah, I think that's the best way to answer that. Education for me is not going to be the biggest thing that I'm looking for in a candidate. I'm really looking more for like professional experience and skills.
Yeah, I think that's like pretty much most of the questions. Oh yeah. Oh, we have more question.
How's it going? Great minds think alike. Great minds think alike.
Would you recommend a physics minor in order to get jobs at NASA or other like?
Sure. If I understand your question, you said a minor, like a
Yes, a
minor
physics minor.
Okay. No. The reason why, and like really a lot of my answers to a lot of the questions, it depends on the hiring team. I'm just going to be speaking from my hiring team is that I don't even look at the minor. And the reason why is like I said previously, at least for me, when I'm looking for a candidate, I want to see, can you contribute value? And so when I'm looking at that, I want to see is, can you work like in industry and stuff like that? What we do is we're looking at like, can you work well with others? You will never work in a job where you're just doing it by yourself. And can you actually do the job? So can you actually code? And a minor is not going to give me that information. Even a major is not going to give me that information. And I can say that for me because I actually wasn't a computer science major when I was in school. I actually did electrical engineering. And so that had nothing to do with what I'm doing right now. I'm doing as actually as far as humanly possible away from doing electrical engineering. So not to be blunt or anything, because a minor might actually be valuable to you. And if it's valuable to you, you should still do it. It's kind of like why I'm doing my master's right now. It's a valuable thing to me. But in terms of getting a job or getting a job at NASA, having a minor on your resume is not going to really affect it. What's going to be more important is if you can actually have like personal projects or having professional projects on your resume somewhere.
I think we gotta put the meeting to an end soon because I feel like a class outside and take the classroom.
Sure.
But thank you so much, Aaron, for like speaking for us.
Yeah, sure. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, just add me on LinkedIn or hit me up on Discord. I will actually read them, and I'm actually really happy to answer these.
Oh yeah, for sure. And if all the resources you provided, we'll probably provide them like in our Discord for people to use.
Sure thing.
Alrighty, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.